Back. So good to see you all after our 2-year offline. So, welcome to the committee's 36th annual commemoration of the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. To our local and state representatives and to the citizens of Greater Attleboro, it is indeed a great pleasure to see you here today and to see that you continue to deem it important to gather to celebrate the Reverend Dr. King's legacy. At an early age, the Reverend Dr. King made a decision to become a public servant to help create a better future for African Americans in the United States who were living without basic civil rights. What he accomplished, though, was to make the world a better place for humankind. To that end, this year, the committee chose the state of voting rights as its theme. The committee thought the best way to honor Dr. King's legacy is to continue the work for voting rights that he and other icons of the civil rights movement worked so hard to secure, lifting barriers to access to all those who desire to vote. Sadly, Dr. King, as well as many others who toiled alongside him, lost his life at a young age while working on behalf of others. But Dr. King left us a treasure trove of inspirational words that continue to guide us, and he left us a blueprint on how to work collaboratively and nonviolently for social justice. Anyone who dedicates his or herself to the cause of making the future a better place for others should be celebrated. So I thank you for recognizing that and for being here today as we do just that. We'll start our commemorative event with remarks and a proclamation from Mr. Jay Delisio, Acting Mayor of Attleboro.
Thank you, Ethel, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. Before we get started, I would just like to recognize some of our colleagues in attendance. We have Acting President Todd Kobus, Councilor Dee Simone, Councilor Waterman, City Clerk Kate Jackson, and School Committee Member Chris Frappier, as well as former City Councilor John Davis. Over the course of Dr. King's life, his focus was equal access to voting, ensuring democracy for one and all. One of his most pivotal speeches given was the Give Us the Ballot speech in response to the Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954. The final line of his historic speech was, "Give us the ballot, and we will quietly and nonviolently, without rancor or bitterness, implement the Supreme Court decision of May 17th, 1954. It wasn't until 1965, after years of intimidation, murders, and advocacy, that the path to the voting booth was cleared for black people with the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965. Originally, legislators hoped that within 5 years of its passage, the issues surrounding the 1965 Voting Act would be resolved, and there would be no further need for its enforcement-related provisions. Unfortunately, they were wrong. Congress had to extend these provisions in 1970, 1975, and 1982, and most recently in 2007. But here we are still today. Nearly 60 years later, voter suppression tactics continue to hinder the progress of fair elections across our country. Redistricting, poll location changes and closures, limited access to convenient early voting are current attempts to disenfranchise black and colored voters, black and people of color voters. As I conclude my comments today and look forward to listening to your voices, I'd like to leave you with this. You'll hear many quotes today from the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but today I want to share a quote from Lyndon Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act into law. "It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country. There is no issue of states' rights or national rights. There is only the struggles for human rights." So it is with those, thank you. It's with those words that I'd like to present to the committee. Unblock the vote, lifting barriers to access, January 16th, 2023. Whereas Martin Luther King Jr., born in Georgia in 1929 and following family footsteps into the Southern Negro ministry, became a crusader for mid-century civil rights movement. turning local conflicts into moral issues of national concern. And whereas convinced that nonviolent resistance was the most potent weapon available to oppress people in their struggle for freedom, Martin Luther King Jr. won the 1964 Nobel Peace Prize for his application of Gandhi's principles to the struggle for racial equality. And whereas, even though Martin Luther King's life was snuffed out by an assassin's bullet on April 4th, 1968, he certainly did his best to try to bring about equality for all. Now, therefore, I, James J. Delisio, Acting Mayor of the City of Attleboro, do hereby proclaim January 16th, 2023 to be Martin Luther King Jr. Day in Attleboro, and we do urge all residents to pause a moment in his honor and rededicate ourselves to nonviolent progress towards his great goal of freedom and equality for all.
Yeah. Now I'm pleased to introduce Crystal Y. Brown Battle, who will deliver a poetry reading for us. Mrs. Brown is a local poet, and I'm pleased to showcase her talents.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. This is a poem that I created special for today's event, Martin Luther King Committee, and Ethel was kind enough to invite me to this event and share the joy, so thank you. The name of my poem is called A New Beginning with Words of Wisdom. 'Tis a new year in handling our plights, by setting up goals and reaching new heights. For dreams to exist, King said to persist and stop hatred, contrary to those who'd insist. For change in mindset, we cannot sit still and waste our minds and talents at will. Forget the old blue, begin a new you, and set up goals in which we'll do the right thing. Strength is power, like high-rise towers, natural like flowers, sweet fruits, none sour. Stay strong, said King, foresee what we'll do. Stay strong despite what we've been through. Each day and night, stay focused with might. You've been served. Your future sees you, it's deserved. Preserve your spirit, stay strong and able. Though life can be unstable, the chance to share your lifelong dreams like King is as vital as they seem. Keep mind of strength that you've possessed. Be conscious of others, you should be blessed. Of the gifts set to you by the Almighty above. Have mercy, be thankful, be free, have love. You rarely know when you'll need each other. Thus treat with compassion like sisters or brothers. As time passes by, look into the sky and see freedom rise mighty high. This is life. Live, laugh, and love it to completion. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Good words to start off 2023 with. Thank you. So next we'll have our state representatives and local representatives, and we'll start with State Representative Adam Scanlon.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ethel, and for your family's work to continue this wonderful tradition right here in Attleboro, in this temple of democracy that is City Hall and our council chambers. Today is a day of remembrance of the life of Dr. King, but it's also a day of celebration where we can look back at the triumphs that Dr. King had worked so hard on for most of his life to ensure equal voting access and ending segregation. But however, today is also a day to challenge us on our ongoing work to fight injustice. As Dr. King once said, "Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere." Dr. King inspired us through his approach of civility. I'm so proud to work with our local delegation and our congressman and our acting mayor in a way that Dr. King envisioned, where we can all work together to get things done. We all believe in a type of politics where we can work together to lift up every single member of this community, including our Black and brown population. We have so much more work to do to expand access to our educational programs, housing production, and producing on quality of life issues for our seniors and veterans. Massachusetts, I like to call the look-to state. Massachusetts was the first state to legalize same-sex marriage in the country. Massachusetts was the first state to create a universal health care program. And just this past session, Massachusetts embarked in expanding voting access through the Votes Act by ensuring more opportunities for early voting and continued mail-in balloting. However, we must continue to fight systemic injustices just as we do racism in our community. As a state rep, I hear and see what our people of color are saying, and I've seen racism happen throughout my time in office. Even just meeting with a person of color in a restaurant, sitting down at a cafe, and it's interesting and sometimes disheartening to see when other people get up around me because they feel uncomfortable. But we can't accept tolerance. We have to aim for respect. We can't just have more seats at a table. We just have to have a bigger table where we can bring all of these issues to life to move the needle forward. I really appreciate every minute in office that I've had, and I will continue to work with my fellow delegation members to lift up people of color and understand that there are systemic inequalities, systemic inequities that we must continue to work to address. And we have to continue to keep Dr. King's dream alive of equality and fairness for all. Thank you.
Next is State Representative Jim Hawkins.
Thank you, Ethel, for all your work to arrange this ceremony year after year, and your family for 30-something years, I think. It's an amazing tribute to Dr. King. The theme today is, of course, voting, and in Massachusetts, we're proud of some of the renovations we've had for mail-in voting, for early voting. Our redistricting was designed to create more minority-majority districts. All of these things are very good, but it's not the end of the story for us. One of the things that particularly troubled me, it was just a word, but came out during the pandemic, is one of the issues we were concerned about COVID and the effect on communities of color. And it resonated, why is there a community of color? Why does this even exist? I find that very upsetting that that's what's happening. And there's some big issues around housing, big issues around transportation, big issues around education, all of which affect this, that this is still, we're not where we need to be in this state. We're proud of the things that we've done, but we're just starting on the challenge. And I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this, and thank you again, Ethel, for making this happen.
State Senator Paul Feeney.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is wonderful to be here. Thank you again, Ethel. I know every speaker is reflecting on their gratitude towards you, but it is well deserved. To you and your family and your team and everybody that brings us here year after year, thank you so much. To be here with my fellow legislators, Representative Scanlon, Representative Hawkins, to serve with you is an absolute pleasure because I know what is in your heart and why you serve. Acting Mayor DeLisio, thank you so much for the work that you do on behalf of the city every day, for being here and opening up City Hall for this ceremony. And to Congressman Auchincloss, my friend, I pray for you each day down there in D.C., I'll tell you that. But how wonderful it is to have a congressman that not only shows up time after time here in the district, right? But truly, and this is rare in this day and age, leads with a moral compass and a North Star of justice and equity. We are so lucky to have him representing us in Congress. This has become an absolutely wonderful and treasured tradition in the city each year. And I'm honored to stand here with you once again to celebrate, but also to reflect and to recommit. On the surface, we join together in gatherings across the nation this weekend to celebrate the life of a man. But we would be wise to also memorialize the depth of his spirit and the intensity of his love and the wisdom of his sermons. However, the true measure of Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy lies not only in the memorable prose and poetry delivered by a talented preacher to audiences of thousands, but in the day-to-day happenings of a deeply spiritual man who lived a life for others. The marches, the arrests, the violence, and the beatings, the organizing, the protests, the boycotts, the speeches, and the preaches. Those are certainly the indelible visions and stories that have been passed on from generation to generation to show the sheer greatness of the man that we celebrate today. The greatest lessons for me, however, lie not just in the movement, but in the moments. The organizing and leading of congregants as the pastor of Dexter Ave Baptist Church, where small changes were made, but big impacts were felt. The speeches given not just on the Mall in Washington, but in the basements of churches across this nation. All right. The partnership with his beloved Coretta, whose love is now memorialized in the Embrace, a statue that sits in the middle of my hometown, in the hub of a place that has struggled with race for generations. Think about that. Think about that for a moment. A tribute to a man who led the civil rights movement, who fought for equity and for justice, who was assassinated while standing up for workers and the labor movement. A man who made thousands of appearances and just as many speeches. Yet the abstract representation of that man now sits on Boston Common isn't one of pomp or power. Unlike many other statues in historic cities and even right here in Massachusetts, it doesn't display violence or vanity. Nope. It's love. It's love. That's it. A hug that certainly came at a big moment with the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize, but still, that one action of embrace, that simple hug, brothers and sisters, that display of affection shows the driving force of a man behind a movement. It is love. It's those reflections of a life lived for others that often serves as inspiration, especially when challenges arise. We can learn not just by the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King, but by his actions, by the way he responded to violence and oppression, by the way he organized the oppressed, by the way he gave voice to the voiceless, by the way he spoke truth to power, by the way he sacrificed his own freedom and comfort so that others may be free and comfortable in the future, by the way he showed compassion, empathy, and love. So, today we use those things, we should use those things as our own call to action. Understanding that we have an obligation to do our part, to continue the work of Dr. King, not by winning a Nobel Peace Prize or leading a movement, but by standing up for justice in small ways, fighting for equity in different ways, and giving our love to others always. Simply, we bloom where we are planted, brothers and sisters. Dr. King was truly the unlikely leader that found himself in a place and time that wasn't of his own choosing or driven by ambition. He was called upon, and thank God Almighty, he answered that call. So today, we shall recommit ourselves to answering our own call, wherever we may be and whatever we may do. Certainly my own life as a policymaker, I am cognizant of the shape and struggles of our past and what they look like today. Signs may no longer hang at water fountains or lunch counters, but the signs of oppression haven't disappeared. If slavery and separate but equal are signs of overt, on the spectrum of overt racism, then we must admit that dog whistles and voter suppression are on the spectrum of covert racism. As Dr. King proclaimed, like we just heard a few moments ago, as he proclaimed decades ago in a well-regarded speech, give us the ballot. Give us the ballot. He understood that the power to make change did not inherently exist in the power of the government. With all things being equal, it has always existed and exists today in the power of the people. So let's fight to continue to deliver on that promise of power. Let us join together in the spirit of Dr. King and embrace love, and celebrate our commonality while defeating the forces of hate and divisiveness. Through words, in prayer, through music and poetry, and most of all in our own interactions with each other. Let's live our own lives in a way that is worthy of the sacrifice of Dr. King, today, tomorrow, and for generations to come. I am honored to be here with you today, my brothers and sisters. Enjoy the day in the company of each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We will now have Congressman Jake Auchincloss. Welcome.
Ethel, thank you for the work that you've done for today and for so many years. And in the future, I'd like to speak before Senator Feeney. But in seriousness, Senator, thank you for your gracious words, and more importantly, thank you for your powerful remarks. Now, we're gathering today to celebrate the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Our words of commemoration today and all days are right and proper. We must tell his story and honor his ongoing fight to remind ourselves and our children that we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. But as the late congressman and legendary ally to Dr. King, John Lewis, would often say to his colleagues, when you pray, move your feet. We move our feet when we defend the franchise and support the integrity of our elections. Last month, Congress made the Electoral Count Act reform the law of the land, ensuring that the presidential electoral counts tallied by Congress accurately tabulate each state's popular vote for president. To prevent another day like January 6th, this bill tightens and clarifies the legal standard for objecting to election results and clarifies that the vice president's role is ministerial only. The right to vote is the foundational right of citizenship. Indeed, Dr. King wrote that no law could be just if it were passed by a majority over a minority who did not have the unhampered right to vote. Right. We should be proud of the progress made in defending that right since the passage of the Voting Rights Act that Dr. King helped make reality. However, we must also reckon with emerging threats to the franchise, legal challenges to the Voting Rights Act, subversion of nonpartisan state and local election officials, gerrymandering, and disinformation. These are threats whose precise forms are new, but whose intent and substance is old. Dr. King would have recognized them and would have cautioned us against looking away or mouthing words bereft of action. I believe also that Dr. King would recognize today the housing injustice against which he was organizing in his final years. The Fair Housing Act, passed into law by Congress in the wake of his assassination, is, I would argue, far more grievously unfulfilled in its aspiration than the Voting Rights Act. Let's be blunt. When it comes to housing, many are praying, but too few are moving their feet. Here in Massachusetts, housing costs and shortages are strangling our economy. They are depriving older Americans of the dignity of retirement. They are locking families into cycles of hardship, and they are exacerbating racial inequality. Let's move our feet. Let's build the housing that is the basis for a more fair and just economy. Let's protect the sinews of our electoral machinery from authoritarians. You have my commitment to move with you. I hope you all have a meaningful Martin Luther King Day with your family and loved ones.
You all spoke well and equally powerful, so thank you all. Well, I thank you all for coming. I especially thank the citizens of Attleboro, Greater Attleboro, and our state and local representatives for helping the committee officially start off MLK's holiday celebration in Attleboro. So we thank you. So this concludes the program here, but we invite you to join us at Second Congregational at 2 p.m. I don't have my watch here, but in a few moments, where we have our keynote speaker, Tanisha Sullivan, the president of the Boston NAACP. Hope to see you there, and thank you once again for coming.